Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, my fourth video of the day. Goodness me, it's a busy day. That's what happens when you have NATO summits thrown into the mix. This is a video giving you the extra tidbits to get your teeth into, to give you an understanding of that war, that horrible war that is taking place in Ukraine. So, team, where should we go to first? I guess we'll go to Tatarigami. This chap often presents tactics that both sides utilize in the war on the front line. This is with regard, this particular thread, to a recently obtained valuable Russian document titled Recommendations for Countering an Enemy Operating as Tank and Mechanized Columns. This thread will include analysis of select section of the manual, extracting insights from its content. In other words, what we saw in Malotokmachka, I wonder whether, when all the Bradleys and tanks got hit, whether this, what the Russians did defensively against that column or against those vehicles, can be evidence in their tactical advice manual. So the manual highlights utilization of combined arms units and formations by the armed forces of Ukraine. According to them, Ukrainian tactics are based on NATO strategy, adapted for local conditions and implemented by Ukrainian commanders through memorized NATO combat algorithms. And here you have an infographic detailing, I don't know, something, lots of green clouds. Who knows? So the discussed section is titled Frontal Attack via Pierced Corridor with Armored Vehicles. To enhance clarity, I will blend book visuals with my original graphics. As per the manual, Ukrainian units initiate the first stage by conducting reconnaissance with small recon groups. And these groups typically consist of platoon-sized units, 30 personnel, reinforced with 1 or 2 tanks and 2 to 3 BMPs or infantry fighting vehicles. Notably, alternative vehicles like pickups and mounted firearms have been mentioned. Each group operates within a 5 to 10 kilometer front. In the subsequent stage, following the identification of a vulnerable point in the defense by the recon team, the assault unit rapidly progresses toward the designated breakthrough locations. 2 distinct compositions of Ukrainian assault columns have been noted. Here is, I presume, I'm not quite sure what is going on with this. I guess you've got 10 kilometers. So these 2 groups, or maybe even 4 groups, doing their work, trying to probe, find a weakness. And I think this is a group that's found a weakness through there, and I'm not quite sure. But a tank column comprising 8 to 10 tanks with infantry positioned on the armored vehicles, commencing from the 4th or 5th tank, a mixed column featuring the initial 5 to 9 tanks, followed by AFV. So there's your 2 ways of doing it. Tanks followed by, tank mix of, that looks like 8 to 9. Yeah, that's 8 to 10 tanks with infantry positioned on the tanks, or tanks and IFVs as the mix. So during the advance towards a breakthrough area, artillery engages in preparatory fire, targeting entire width of the defense line. The objective is twofold: to obscure the main direction of the attack and to hinder the defending forces' ability to maneuver. The Ukrainian forces operates as a column without deploying into a battle formation or dismounting infantry. The Ukrainians swiftly advance in a march order, following the best route through the open terrain. The objective is to rapidly breach the troops' front line, anticipating collapse of the defenders. Subsequently, the Ukrainian assault unit bypasses Russian second echelon units, aiming to capture the nearest town. During the approach, Ukrainian vehicles increase speed and heavily shell the outskirts, forcing defending unit to retreat deeper into a town, allowing safe dismounting. The Russians analysed the strengths of this tactics and proposed countermeasures. Per their analysis, Ukrainian objective is to overpower Russian units and disrupt coordinated defence. The direction of attack is determined based on weak points identified by reconnaissance groups. Mentioned weaknesses are well established. Concerning mentioned weaknesses, well established recon allows to detect the Ukrainian assault column's movement beforehand. Additionally, the advancing assault unit has limited firepower and striking capabilities, with only the first 2 or 3 tanks or BMPs able to engage in combat. The idea is if you're going in a column and your enemy is in front of you, then if the vehicles behind you can't fire at the enemy in front of you because of the tanks or IFVs in front of you. It would be too dangerous. But in a sense, it's the best way to minimize casualties because you're all in a line, but you also can't inflict casualties as much. So it kind of works both ways. They also note that the rapid selection of the breakthrough point may not always uncover the presence of minefields. Furthermore, the loss of communication with command or supporting artillery is seen as a factor that can result in the abandonment of further assaults. That's the importance of electronic warfare, right? To counter this tactic, authors emphasize that recon operations should be conducted to detect assault column movements within a range of 5 kilometers. Anti-tank minefields should have at least 3 rows. There should be designated responsible commanders for each junction between units. Just to talk about that, actually. So if you're going to have a long, thin column of vehicles, what that means is if you go over anti-tank mines, then you've sacrificed a unit at the front, but that's taken up that mine. If you're going to go all in a row, it could be that every single one of your vehicles goes over an anti-tank mine, which is set out kind of lengthways, if you like. So you want to minimize that threat by going in a very narrow column, but that itself can cause issues with kind of blocking up. So when in the Malatok Machka debacle, as it's sometimes seen, what happened is they did have cleared corridors, but then when one vehicle gets stuck or does hit a mine or breaks down or whatever's hit by artillery, then that's blocking the other vehicles behind it in a very narrowly cleared corridor. So then what happened is as another was passing by, I think that got hit or something happened, and so now you've got 2 vehicles blocking, and it just compounds the issue. So anyway, to go back to the thread, artillery fire should be prepared on likely paths of the assault unit movements to slow down advance. Commanders, so when you are tracking from the air, drones are tracking the movement of a column, you know exactly where that column's going because every vehicle's following the one in the lead. Whereas if you have vehicles spread out, then of course you're tracking all the different vehicles and wondering which one of them will go. If they're in a column, they all have to follow that lead one, and that you can pretty much track where that column is going to go. So it becomes more predictable and easier to hit. Artillery fire should be prepared on likely paths of the assault unit movements to slow down advance. Commanders should prepare anti-tank reserves and form tank destroyer groups in motorized infantry platoons. Additionally, they should plan airstrikes by Air Force on call, utilizing helicopters equipped with ATGMs and NARs. Authors put emphasis on maximizing concealment and camouflage of other assets as well. As the AFU approaches the 2,000 to 1,000 meter range, tanks and MT-12 guns engage in direct fire, supported by anti-tank guided missile systems. Once the AFU breaches the minefield or reaches the 250 to 300 meter range in front of Russian positions, tank destroyer groups come into action. So actually, there is a good reason why Ukraine is advancing slowly, as in things are difficult, is because you are having to consider artillery, you have to consider anti-tank guns, right? Small, these kind of like smaller, not they're not really howitzers because they're not firing in that kind of trajectory. But you've got your anti-tank guns, you've got anti-tank guided missiles, kind of javelin equivalents that the Russians will have. You've got troops, you've got minefields, you've got trenches, and you've got drones dropping IEDs and drone spotting for the artillery and mortars. All of this stuff, and it's like, right, all those that is the range of challenges, range of obstacle that we have for going from here to there. It's like, it's amazing if we actually get there, considering all of that, if they are all active at once. And I guess the recon is to try and find out places where have that a less active kind of range of obstacle. In the event of a breakthrough, when I'm kind of using obstacle in a much broader sense there, which is everything, not just a thing set in place, but actually helicopters and ATGM teams and so on and so forth. Where did I get to? So, in the event of a breakthrough, anti-tank assets are deployed from cut-off positions. If the Ukrainian successfully breaches positions, measures are taken to close the gap by launching flank attacks from units stationed in unaffected areas, preventing the enemy's reserves from advancing. So here we have sort of ATGM crews, tanks, and I'm not quite sure what's going on here exactly, but I think these are so these are the flanks. So the direction of the Ukrainians is going from top to bottom, and these are flanking groups coming from the side, whilst anti-tank guns are unable to maybe take out some of these. They've been that front line has been breached. That's basically what that shows. In summary, it should be noted that this represents their perspective on AFU actions. However, the battlefield often unfolds in unpredictable ways, deviating from established plans and algorithms, particularly in relation to the armament and actions of the assault unit. Their counter actions rely heavily on multiple components such as the Air Force, minefields, reconnaissance artillery, and anti-tank assets. Effective implementation of this defense requires a certain level of coordination among units to ensure an efficient defense. And this is why they're trying to take out things like, obviously taking out minefields, but that they're having to resort to individual sappers to do that at the moment, taking out artillery, self-propelled artillery and towed artillery with IEDs, with artillery themselves, and with HIMARS, and electronic warfare to take out drones. All of these things need to come together to neutralize the defensive capabilities, but all of these things need to come together for the Russians to neutralize the Ukrainians' attack and to neutralize their counter efforts as well. So it's kind of cat and mouse, isn't it? You want to use your drones to spot your artillery. They're going to use their drones to spot your drones, or use electronic warfare. So then you have to try and take out their electronic warfare, and then they are going to try and take out your ways of taking out their electronic warfare. So it's this consistent arms race, very literally, in terms of this kind of activity. Please be advised that this thread specifically addresses a particular tactical element from the manual and does not provide an exhaustive analysis of the entire document. Subsequent threads will analyze other sections covering various tactics and proposed countermeasures. In fact, he's already brought a second thread out, which I will go through with you, and that's to do, I think, with minefields. So it'll be interesting to see that one. Now, moving on to this chat, Randy Mott. Whatever, this is not necessarily anyone in particular, but here's just a good analysis if you want to feel good about the Ukrainian situation at the moment. And you do wonder, you're thinking it is taking some time and effort, and it's really attritional to get through these initial Russian front lines and across these minefields and trenches. But here is a very positive outlook that might set you more at ease. Take it with a pinch of salt, of course. How do you know Russia is losing? Excellent Ukrainian operational security has mostly blacked out news from the front. 1. Russians are asking for a ceasefire. Russia desperately wants to freeze the battlefield. 2. They are sending less trained soldiers into battle in large numbers. 3. Most conscripts sent in now are equipped with ancient Russian helmets and very old weapons and nothing else. They often seem to have been drafted only weeks before the capture with no training. 4. Russians, boasting of making hundreds of T-90M tanks, seem only able to send ancient T-54s into Ukraine now. Every day, the Ukrainian military grows more modern than the Russians. 5. Russia has stripped its other borders of military personnel and equipment. 6. The refugee flow to Poland, where I live, is almost nothing now. I drive right by their embassy every week, where there were big lines in the early months of the war. Many Ukrainians actually are going home now. 7. Russian military bloggers are not making the rosy reports like the Kremlin Post. They also totally contradict the Russian trolls on Twitter. This is interesting. So there is these mixed messages coming out from the mill blogger community who some of them are quite realist, but they're ultra nationalist, really want Russia to win. They just don't think they're doing well enough. So they are critical of the Russian approach, command and control. Then you've got trolls on my threads, you know who you are, and all over the internet saying one thing, often just towing the party line of the Kremlin. So the Kremlin and the military bloggers aren't seeing eye to eye quite often with what's going on. And yeah, the Russian economy is tanking is point number 8. Point number 9, we do not see many new videos or photos on Twitter from pro-Russian sources depicting great tactical victories. We saw the Malatok-Machka loss of tanks and Bradleys. And then we've seen one in the last few days involving just kind of like 2 or 3 of them. Really not a lot else. There are bits and pieces. There's quite a bit of footage of Ka-52 attack helicopters taking out bits of equipment, but no big loss all at once. The isolated instances have been reposted hundreds of times. Number 10, dozens of Russian units and their families back home are posting videos asking for help due to their lack of support in the front and the suicide missions that they are asked to perform. None of these indicators reflect any chance that Russia is winning or that the war is even stalemate right now. Confirmation will be forthcoming as major Ukrainian victories are very close now. Obviously, that's really positive, but a lot of that is definitely the case. I mean, all of these issues are there. My view has been, at some point, I think there will be some kind of capitulation, or there will be some tipping point where nothing happens for a long time, and then everything happens all at once. I wonder whether there'll be a tipping point where you would get a breach in the line, or where Russian soldiers just like, we're not up for this. You'll start seeing morale plummeting, people deserting. I don't know if that will happen. That's partly my hope, but partly I can also see that as a plausible outcome if there were significant breakthroughs. This is where I lie in bed at night thinking, do you know what? What would I do if I was given 1,000 soldiers? And at some point, I think what would happen if you just flooded a particular area with equipment and soldiers, just really focused an area, say in Bakhmut, like where there isn't going to be all these massive minefields and trench lines in a way that you might expect down near Robotno or somewhere like that. So around Bakhmut, and then you suddenly flooded it, like Klishchivka, suddenly flooded Klishchivka. Would the Russians just then up and just desert or surrender? And then would you have a kind of domino effect? Like if you just flood somewhere, I don't know, this is probably really militarily naive, but you're thinking that can then lead to a knock-on effect, and they hear about that, morale is low, and you have all your psyops as well, and it's like that flood, that dam sort of cracking and breaking. Or is that just completely unrealistic? You get one area overrun, and then it's just business as usual in the next place. But anyway, just a couple of nighttime bits of activity here. This is attacking Shahed drones. Sometimes I just wonder how much lead has been pelted into the sky to take out these Shahed drones. Yes. So in the end, apparently they hit something, I don't know, shooting down Russian Shahed drones. Yeah, just so much lead. And also, where does all that lead land? Some of those larger rounds, on that, do they hurt when they fall? I don't know. Someone can let me know. This is a Stugna Skiff, a Ukrainian indigenous anti-tank guided missile. Actually, it's a system of 2 people, one with the screen, and you kind of target it using the screen. The other one shoots it. It could be up to sort of, I think, 30 to 50 meters away with the actual tube, and fires that off. Now, this is one hitting a moving target at night, and I think this is quite impressive, actually. Um, so you have what looks like a fairly quickly moving vehicle. It's already fired off. That's the missile going towards it already. That's moving at quite a pace, that vehicle. And then bang, hit. That's pretty catastrophic. So these Stugners, there was so much video footage of these in the first, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 months of the war, and I don't know if they've started to run out of these. They were made in Izium, I think, and then Izium was captured by the Russians, and the factory there obviously was unable to operate, and it still will be unable to operate, I assume. I think they are making these now, so I reported possibly a week or two ago, which means they'll be making them somewhere else in Ukraine. But they've had a lot of success with that weapon. Now, here's something that's pretty cool. The first servicewoman has passed the Ukrainian Special Forces qualification course. That's excellent. I mean, being able to tap into the rest, the other 50% of the population is going to be super useful. And yeah, absolutely brilliant to see that happening. It's just going to really help the war effort if all duties can be carried out perfectly well by each sex, then that just means your recruitment base is massive. There's no statement about equality of opportunity or anything. This is literally from a practical point of view. You want to be dipping into the personnel pot as much as you can. Right. Here is a video. Thierry told me to post this. This is from 2020. There's nothing new, but this is apparently a video taken in Russia. I don't know what's going on with the laying of this railway track. But they've laid a new railway track, and they've just gone round the pylons, like in multiple places. And I don't know whether that was done on purpose. They knew it was going to happen, and they were going to remove the pylons later, or whether that is just the most insane bit of railway laying in history. Just like, what are you doing? There you go. I thought I'd share that with you. Put a smile on your face. Right. Last thing I'm going to talk about is with regard to this. I showed you this yesterday. This is a drone dropping an IED onto a hand grenade or something onto these mines, and then all the mines get triggered and blown up. So trigger warning. Bang. There you go. Here we have Trent Selenko talking about that. It says, this video, the Ukrainian Mavic drone dropping a grenade to clear Russian anti-tank mines, is downstream from the fact Ukraine has trained one drone operator per 100 troops. That is a significant statistic. So this is a drone tech thread. Not only does the Ukrainian armed forces have drone operators with every artillery forward observer, it has grenade dropping drones with its combat engineers to assist in mine clearing, both finding and clearing them. The lack of such drones at the scale in Western and particularly the US Army leaves them behind in the drone arms race the Russo-Ukrainian war has kicked off. There's going to be so much learning from this conflict, right? And the US, it's easy to criticize the US and say, well, you need to do more of this. But actually, until you see war happening, modern war happening, and by modern war, I mean, war that's happening right now. And then, in a year's time, things will be updated. So you can't learn until there's a war happening right then. So until you see that, it's very hard to know what works, what doesn't work, and in the real practical sense on the battlefield, and what you might need. So it's a game of guessing what you're going to need, predicting what the enemy has and will do, but never really being able to practice it, or not often being able to practice the tactics and the technology in a real world environment. So what this war is providing for the US and NATO and everyone in China and Russia and Ukraine is a really big lesson in what works, what doesn't work, what you need, what you don't need, etc., etc. And so the US will be behind where Ukraine is in many respects in terms of all sorts of things. Like the US Army won't have, and the UK Army, and the German Army, and any other army won't have trained as many drone operators as the Ukrainians. Of course, they're going to be behind. So eh, we must temper our opinions with a dose of reality in understanding that, yeah, we can't compete with what Ukraine have at the moment, and we shouldn't think we're any the less as a result of that, because Ukraine are at war, like directly at war in a way that we, whether you're the US, UK, France, or Australia, or whatever, we are not at war in the way that Ukraine are. So they would have trained up more people and have more stuff than we have by country mile. Anyway, small, cheap, many drones are the dreadnought battleship technological event of the 21st century. Ways of fighting without drones are going to lose ways of fighting with them every time. Has the US Army's engineering branch staffers at Fort Leonard Wood even begun to do staff analysis of what obstacle breaching means in the age of drones, finding mines with cheap thermal cameras on cheap drones? I assume they probably have. Or how many disposable jammers will be needed for seeding, covering, engineer mine obstacles to prevent a breach? Or how many and how powerful, large will the organic drone jammer table of organization need to be so that combat engineers can breach a complex obstacle covered by cheap grenade dropping drones? And by cheap, we are talking $1,000 for a small grenade dropping drone and $5,000 for loitering munition with a javelin class shaped charge warhead made with jamming, dampening, 3D printed composite structure and commercial off the shelf digital radio electronics. The arrival of drone warfare via drones means every unit that has to stay in the open for extended periods, like combat engineers breaching obstacles, needs to be deeply drone conscious and organically drone or counter drone equipped. I think this is like, of course, the US Army will be on this. And this is the future. I mean, we are seeing this in real time. If you think the US Army is sitting back and going, "Oh, that's amazing! Look what's going on in Ukraine," and then just ignoring it, you'd be insane. So yeah, they will be learning so much from this. Keeping electronic warfare techies in the army is hard. For US soldiers, thinking that US Army is the most technologically sophisticated on the planet, ask your combat engineers if they could do what Ukraine just did in combat with a cheap drone. Well, no, they couldn't, but then necessity is the mother of all invention. So I think this is kind of a little bit unfair to the US or any established armed force. It's like if you're not at war, you aren't being driven by the absolute existential threat and necessity to put things in place. Like the US aren't going to be like, oh my god, if we don't train all these drone operators, if we don't get electronic warfare stuff sorted now, we will cease to exist as a nation within a year. Like they don't have that. Ukraine has that. So yeah, the US won't have done that to the extent that Ukraine has. But that's comparing apples and bricks. So if they say, no, you are not the most technologically sophisticated army on the planet anymore, I guess there's a difference between technologically sophisticated. So I think the US will have these capabilities and they will be updating, they'll be spending good money, big money on the very best in electronic warfare, jamming, and all of this. The question is, do they have that proliferated through the armed services to the degree that Ukraine has and to the degree that they would need to if they were in a war? Almost certainly not. What I suggest would happen would they put things in place in the event of a war, that training would take place really, really quickly. You don't need to spend gazillions training everyone to get all this tech right proliferated right throughout your armed forces there and then, but you need to have a plan to improve that and then to be able to very quickly get that sorted in the event of a war. In the same way that Ukraine had done that. Ukraine didn't have that a year ago. They've got that now. So you can do these things really quickly. Should you rely on like last minute sorting stuff out? Yeah, possibly not, but have a good plan for that. I mean, you don't have to suddenly, because if the US spend a gazillion dollars now on getting all these amazing drones and electronic warfare stuff proliferated throughout the US Army and all the operators well trained, then within a couple of years, that equipment is going to be out of date, right? And then you need to train a whole new bunch of people on new stuff. So you keep going, and then when you do get to war, then you need to be on a footing that you can produce loads of stuff really quickly and get people trained really, really quickly. So maybe there's a basic foundational training, get a lot of people trained on that, like just general drone operation. I'm sure that'll be happening, and then you get more specialized stuff as that tech is developed. But I'm sure the US are not ignoring that tech. So I would say the US are probably the most technological, sophisticated army on earth in small amounts or in particular places, but they just won't have that to scale because they don't need it to scale. It's unrealistic to think they should have it to scale. Yeah, if you're willing to spend a gazillion spondoolies like every month, making sure that your armed forces is ready for a war tomorrow, then yeah, you go and spend that money. But yeah, good luck on funding schools. So there's got to be some kind of sweet spot where you are developing these capabilities without you know without screwing up over the rest of your society. Um, anyway, it means it is time to ask someone some really sharp questions because you all will be fighting Ukrainian class drone technology in the next 3 to 5 years. Russia, Iran, and China are taking notes. You should too. Of course, they're taking notes. I think this is somewhat disingenuous. Of course, they're taking notes. There'll be people in the US Army, absolutely, in armed forces, absolutely on this for sure. And they know that China is a massive threat. Taiwan is looming potentially. So yeah, I think. But the point is salient. The point being that this is a race to be technologically proficient, but also have that to scale if needed. I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you guys think. Is Trentelenko right in having a little dig, perhaps at the US here army provision, or is that unrealistic? Do you think the US is doing enough, or whatever country you are a citizen of, is your country prepared? Is it, the thing about NATO, of course, is if you're relying on a group to do that, you specialize. Like if everyone was trying to develop the very best in electronic warfare jamming, then actually that's a bit of a waste. It's like you guys do electronic warfare, you guys do unmanned sea drones, sea vehicles, USVs, you guys do anti-satellite stuff. There's all sorts of things to consider. If everyone's doing everything, then that is deeply inefficient. So that you need that kind of specialization, and NATO allows you to draw on other people's expertise. I think to create a much greater either attacking force or defending force. Anyway, whatever, Pierce, shut up now. Time to go. Thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. I will be speaking to you tomorrow. I hope the electrician is coming back tomorrow, and I will not have. I know I won't have electricity for large parts of the day because my board is having to be replaced, and I think there are some electrical issues around here that is enough to make a grown man cry. That's what happens when you get a house that had its electrics done in like the 1800s or something. Whatever. So the point being that my videos may be a little bit randomly dispersed tomorrow. Take care. Speak soon.